We're going to spend this class looking at different ways of evaluating the homeless program. Although we're going to look at them as if the evaluations have already taken place so we can put some numbers into them, in fact, you need to build evaluation in at the very beginning of a program. Otherwise, you can't collect the data that you need to do the evaluations. Let's suppose we've implemented the permanent supportive housing program and we had 100 participants. At the time of the evaluation, several years later, 60 of them remain in permanent supportive housing in a stable way, and they have improved health outcomes, reduced incarceration, and have done pretty well with respect to all the outcomes we care about. The question is then, have we made a difference? Did our intervention make a difference, or, to go back to the idea of the counterfactual in the last class, might it have happened anyway? One very simple way of trying to evaluate the outcome is to compare the participants before they entered the program and afterwards. Suppose at the end of the evaluation period, we had 100 participants, homeless people who had poor health and other metrics. 40 of them are still homeless. 60 of them are in stable housing. Therefore, there was a 60% success rate. That looks pretty good, doesn't it? But maybe during the same period, there were other factors that would have contributed to their improvement. For example, the economy got much better during this period. How might we do better? Remember that in addition to the group that got permanent supportive housing, we have another group of homeless people who just got the usual services that the city provides. How might we use the fact that we have two groups to our advantage when doing the evaluation? So for the rest of this class, I'm going to talk about a treatment group and a comparison group. The treatment group is the group that gets permanent supportive housing. The comparison group are homeless people who do not. Let's use the fact that we have two different groups now, and we're going to establish a treatment group by choosing volunteers from homeless people to participate in permanent supportive housing. And now we're going to establish a comparison group, homeless people who did not volunteer, but who appear pretty similar to them. Those will be the members of the comparison group. Now let's compare the two groups in terms of outcome metrics. The problem here is that there may be many differences among homeless individuals, including their motivation for volunteering. Those who volunteer may have more motivation to stay out of homelessness than those who didn't. So the question is, how do you ensure that the matching group is sufficiently similar to those who received permanent supportive housing? Here's one way of improving the accuracy of our evaluation. It's called propensity score matching. As before, we have a treatment and a comparison group, but now we identify characteristics of individuals in the treatment group, those who receive the permanent supportive housing intervention. For example, their current physical and mental health conditions, their use of drugs, characteristics that we believe are relevant to success in permanent supportive housing. Now we identify individuals in the comparison group who have similar characteristics. This creates a subset of the comparison group who are similar to those in the treatment group. In effect, you're predicting that these individuals of the comparison group could be in the treatment group, that they have the propensity to be in that group. And then we only use that subset of individuals in the comparison group when comparing outcomes. The advantage is that it makes individuals in the treatment group and the comparison group more similar. The disadvantage is it only controls for those characteristics that you've identified, and there may be characteristics that are really important to success in the permanent supportive housing program that you just haven't been able to identify. Let me talk about another technique that may improve our evaluation. This is called difference in differences, and it's a little bit complicated. Once again, we have our treatment group and our comparison group. We establish baselines for each group by assessing their scores on relevant metrics, say physical and mental health, drug abuse, their housing history, before the program began. Now we calculate changes in each group at the end of the evaluation period. For each of those groups, the treatment group and the comparison group, we subtract the percent showing improvements in these characteristics from the baseline. Thus, you have a before and after difference for each group. Now we subtract the difference in the treatment group from the difference in the comparison group. This is the difference of the two differences, and that's where the technique gets its name. The advantage of this is it reduces external factors that may affect all homeless people, such as changes in the economy or changes in the weather, but it still has a limitation that you may not have identified all relevant differences between people in the treatment group and the comparison group, though of course you can combine this with the propensity score matching scheme that I described just before. We're now going to turn to another evaluation technique, randomization, or sometimes called randomized controlled trials, which is often called the gold standard for evaluation.